Hello, welcome to our conversation. You are a partner in our conversation, so thank you for tuning in. Today, my friend who is here with me to talk in this conversation is Faith Gong. Faith is the newest member of the Ilsley Public Library Board. So I'm going to give a kickoff question, and then you can go where you want to go with that. I wonder, I'm curious, when did you know that a library would become one of the most important buildings and places in your life?
Well, I think that question is a great question, Len. I think it has, like many questions, a short answer and a long answer. So the short answer is that when our family was preparing to move to Middlebury, and we moved to Middlebury from Berkeley, California, because my husband had a job right out of graduate school in Berkeley, teaching economics at Middlebury College. We had at that point 2 children. We had a 3-year-old and a 1-year-old, and we had a 3-month-old baby. And we flew out to Middlebury in April with our 3-month-old baby for 3 days to find a place to live. And I think in those 3 days, we looked at something like 11 houses.
Oh,
there was just this, we had these 3 children. I really didn't want to move and then have to move again. So we had this goal to find a place in 3 days. We were going to make that happen. So it was a very scheduled time. But I realized, this being my first time setting foot in Middlebury, that because of these 3 children, I really wanted to look at the library. Because I knew at that moment that the library was going to be a key part of our family's life in this town. And so somewhere in between looking at all these houses and making a choice about where we were going to live, we came to Ilsley and we looked at the children's room, and I just felt such a warmth about the library that I knew right then it was going to be okay to move here with our family. And that has been the case. The library in Middlebury has been just a cornerstone of our family's life in this town. We now have 4 daughters. They are 4, 6, 8, and 9 years old. And ever since we moved here, almost 7 years ago, we have come to Ilsley about every week. We generally have upwards of 50 books checked out. We attend library programs. My oldest daughter has now branched into filmmaking, which she's been able to explore through a variety of workshops with Kurt Broderson. Trisha Allen, who's the children's librarian, is, in addition to being a dear friend of ours, just a consummate librarian. She knows my children's reading tastes. She will handpick books and put them on hold for my daughters because she knows that this is something that they'll enjoy. So that's how the library here in Middlebury has become a key part of our lives. And I think particularly in the past year, just with the climate in this country and some of the divisiveness that's happening, I sat back at a point last fall and I just thought, what is it that I can really find to love about what we have here in this country and in this community? And really the obvious answer to me was libraries, because they're such a radical institution if we really step back and think about it. I think, like so many things in this country, we can take libraries for granted. And we just think of them as they're just something that's there. It's this old building in our town, and you go in and it smells kind of musty. But if one really steps back and thinks about the fact that this is a place filled with books and computers now and all sorts of media, which are filled with knowledge, which can teach us things, which can take us to different places, which can introduce us to people who we wouldn't meet otherwise. And it's all sitting right there. And anyone can go in and you sign your name and you get a card and you can have access to this. That is a radical thing. So when an opening came up on the Ilsley Library Board, and again, my friend Trisha, who's the children's librarian, encouraged me to consider running for it because there weren't a lot of people who had young children and could represent the children's room on the board at that point. I thought, of course, because I love this community and I love this library, and this is an obvious way for me to serve. So that's the short answer, which turned out to not be so short. And the longer answer is that libraries, if I look back, I can trace my whole life through libraries. There's a library at every point in my life story.
What was the first library like?
The first library was Dolly Madison Library, and it was in McLean, Virginia, which is the town in which I grew up. So it's a Washington, D.C. suburb, upper middle class, a lot of people who work for the government live there, as my father did. And I grew up there from the age of 1 up until I left for college. But one of my earliest memories is going to that library on Saturday mornings with my father. This was our thing that we did together, a daddy-daughter thing.
Oh, that's special.
It was very special. And what this library did on Saturday mornings was they showed movies. And this was pre-VCR. This was when...
This is real movies.
This was in the dark ages. This was when if you wanted to see Mary Poppins or The Wizard of Oz, you had to wait a year until it was showing on television some night. So the fact that this library showed movies on Saturday mornings was really special.
That's great.
And I would go there with my father every week and watch a movie. And then, of course, my mother would take me during the week to check out books. And it really was a pivotal place in my childhood because we were there often. And then, of course, I grew older. Same library and other branches because this was a pretty large suburb. And as I was going through school, we had research projects. So I have a lot of very fond memories of being with a group of friends at a library and having to work collaboratively on a project and looking things up. This, again, I'm aging myself, but this was when we had card catalogs that were actual index cards and microfiche. And so making use of libraries in that way as a workspace and really as a place to learn for our school projects.
Well, was there another library someplace along the line that maybe introduced you to something new that you hadn't thought about before?
Well, I think that there are a couple of examples of that at different points in my life. After college, where obviously the library was an important place to study, I ended up with a job as a teacher in Greenwich, Connecticut. And I don't know how much you or your viewers know about Greenwich, Connecticut, but
I can speak for myself, not too much.
Not too much. It's one of the wealthiest towns in the United States. It's a suburb of New York City. And at the time that I was there, as a 21-year-old fresh out of college, it seemed to me that all the men, and certainly all the fathers of my students, were high-powered investment bankers, and all their wives, so therefore all the moms of the students I was teaching, were like supermodels. So it's one of those places where everything just looks perfect and it's so affluent. And I had no sense of self in this place as a 21-year-old just launching out into the world. It was such a strange place to be. And most of my friends had landed in big cities where they had a community of each other. And I didn't feel like I had any community. I had no idea who I was in this very strange town. And so what I ended up doing was going to the library there, the public library, because there is a Greenwich Public Library. And I was thinking about this the other day because Tricia Allen was mentioning to me that the trend in library use is that you might go as a young child and then your library use falls off until you have children again. And so I was wondering why was it that I went to the library in this strange childless, single, 21 to 23-year-old demographic of my life. And I really think it was because that was a place where I could see normal people and where money wasn't an issue.
Yeah, right.
And so I appreciated that for the first time. I actually became a friend of that library. One of the first times I ever donated money was to that library.
Well, that's
Oh yeah,
a great thing.
I still have the tote bag. We use it for grocery shopping and our own library books now.
Oh, that's great.
Because it was just such a radical thing for me to think, oh, like here's a little slice of maybe the real world in this very surreal, affluent, wealthy universe that I found myself in. So that was a new thing for me. And then, of course, when I did have my own children, which started happening in Berkeley, California, when my husband was in graduate school.
Right.
The library just became a lifeline.
Right.
It was a way of leaving the house and knowing, unlike grocery shopping, that it would probably be okay. Because even if your child had a meltdown, you were in a children's room with other children having meltdowns and other families who were there in solidarity.
Yeah.
And also because we're just such a reading family, there are books that I read to my daughters that I could just repeat from memory now. And so you just read these books over and over, and after a while you think, my gosh, we need more books. So having a library where we could bring home 50 books as we do and go through those was such a gift.
So when your girls come, do they all have their own special place they go to? They gravitate? I mean, I was thinking about the room downstairs. I think I love that bathtub.
Yes.
I mean,
yes.
I just come in. And so do they kind of, they have different tastes? And
Yes, they do. They do. So the thing about my girls is that my girls are now so comfortable with the library that, first of all, when we open the car doors, they don't wait. And this is the one place I allow them not to wait, because I know that once they run into the children's room, it's safe and everybody knows them.
Right.
So they will just go tearing out of the parking lot directly down to the children's room. Although the division starts there, I have two who will generally take the stairs and two who want to ride the elevator half a floor down because it's an elevator and we don't have many elevators in Middlebury. So it's like an amusement park.
Yeah, that's right.
So when we reach the floor, and I'm sure this will change because my daughters change as they grow, but we have one who parks herself right by the graphic novels.
Okay.
And we'll sit there and go through all of the graphic novels. We have one who will usually choose one book. This was my oldest. Sit herself at the craft table and just go through this one book there, and often do a craft as well. We have one who will alternate between the bathtub and sitting on the floor with the picture books. So that's my third daughter. And my youngest daughter is like a tornado. The first thing the first thing she does is fill up our quota of 5 videos instantly with all of her videos that she wants to watch, which none of her sisters want to watch at all. Oh. She'll put those in the tote bag.
You're getting ageism here.
Right. Then she'll run around and she'll grab a humongous stack of picture books and shove those into the tote bag. Then the dress-up clothes, and then the puppet show area. So she'll
tell me about that, because I don't know about the dress-up clothes.
So around the corner from the picture books, Tricia and the children's staff have set up an area of dress-up clothes, and it's wonderful. It's really grown over the years. So it's just a place to try on clothes and put on different characters and make up your own stories. Yeah. And then similarly, right next to the craft table is a little puppet show theater stocked with puppets. And so actually my 3 out of my 4 girls, my oldest one has aged out of that a little, but the other 3 will put on shows.
Pick up a puppet and do a show, or
they will do that.
Do we do a similar kind of show, or is that something new?
Well, they're princess and knight puppets as well as animals. So it usually has something to do with princess and animals and There's a
Yeah.
unicorn. I have a
Yeah.
daughter who's very into unicorns, so there's usually a unicorn involved. There's some amount of violence involved, usually. Whacking, kind of a Punch and Judy
Yeah,
thing.
Punch and Judy. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
great. That's great. So they uh, they really have made this their home, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So as you think about the library, and think about the things that you've seen over the years, what are some of the things that you would like to see stay present in the library? And then what about some ideas of things that you are contemplating that might be exciting new possibilities?
Okay.
Does that
Sure.
connect?
That does. That does. Well, I think that the things that I'd like to stay about the library are really the things that I've mentioned already,
Right.
that have always drawn me to the library, which is just the democracy of it, the idea that it's such an open space for anybody who needs a safe place to land where there are books and access to computers and access to media. I think that having it be a space where stories are central in all of the forms that takes is so important. With our library, I think the staff makes it. I've mentioned Tricia Allen already, and just the phenomenal job that she does with the children. At this stage in my life, I do not get to make it to the upper floors with the adult books very often, but I have had the privilege of interacting with some of that staff at various times, and especially now through the Board of Trustees. And I know that they work very hard to serve this community. So I think just having the library be a place for the community, that welcomes the community, that reflects the community, that's responsive to the needs of the community. That's what I love about the library. I think that the things that I'm excited about on the board have to do with some of the nuts and bolts, basically, the infrastructure, the physical space of this library. Right now, I think we're at an exciting point. So I came onto the board knowing that there was a renovation project on the table.
Right.
I did not know that shortly we would also be looking for a new director, because our former director, very beloved Kevin Unrath, took another job in another town. So we're now at such a pivotal point with a lot of possibilities. So I'm excited about finding a new director who can usher the library forward, keeping the strengths and adding to them. And I am excited for the possibility of improving upon the space. And I'll talk to the children's room alone, which is that although it is a second home for my children and we love it, it has things that can be improved upon. It's in the basement, it's moldy, it is dark. It's just got sort of sidewalk level windows. If you've been in that space, it's too cramped for the books. I see Tricia filtering out cartloads of books that they just don't have space for anymore. So they're having to make very difficult decisions about what do we keep and what books do we just not have room for anymore. That's a hard choice to make. And there are also some very real security issues with that space. The entrance to the actual children's room is steps from two public restrooms, really the only two always open public restrooms in the library, which are just a few steps down from the main sidewalk entrance. And none of that is observed. So it is possible, and it has happened to me, and I've seen it happen to other families, for children just to go running out and be in an area where there are public restrooms and people coming in and out from the street level. There's not security on those bathrooms, and I have to say, we had a really scary and unfortunate experience with one of my daughters walking into one of those bathrooms into a situation that she shouldn't have had to walk into. And I also think just making the whole building more accessible. There is, for things like strollers and for wheelchairs, there's one ramp, but it goes to a door that's not always open. So there's not an accessible area that's open at all times and takes you into a main part of the library. So those are some of the things that I'm excited about, the possibility of actually having the physical space better serve the community.
We're in an interesting time, aren't we, in terms of my perception as one who works with Middlebury Community Television is that there's a relationship between the library and Middlebury Community Television is really quite unique.
Yes.
We've gone to meetings across the state, and almost no one has the kind of built-in relationship that we have here between Ilsley and MCTV, and that whole technical side is really just open to all kinds of possibilities, as is all the other sides, the stories, the books, the dress-up things,
yes, exactly.
and all of that. So it's a very, and I my sense is that we really have had good conversations, and we still have more to go in the community as we look towards the plans that are out there now.
Yes.
And the possibilities that all that opens up.
Yes.
You know. It's exciting time.
It is exciting, and I feel hopeful about it. And it's a long process, I think. We're thinking 5 years at this point in terms of seeing any renovation actually happen, which does give us time to listen to each other and consider how a space best meets the needs of the community. But I think you're absolutely right about the interplay between MCTV and the library and how unique that is. And it's meant so much to my 9-year-old who's had the chance to take classes with Kurt.
Is she a filmmaker?
She is a filmmaker, yes. And so she took a stop motion class with Kurt and absolutely loved it. She was one of 3 girls in this class. So that meant a lot to her and to me as a mom to be kind of blazing a path. And then Tricia Allen asked her to help make the summer reading video that she was then going to take around to the area schools to promote the summer reading program. So my daughter got to work with Kurt and Tricia on that, which just meant the world to her. To this day, she still asks if we can watch that video because she's so proud of it. And
by all means.
And I think out of that process where they actually storyboarded what the video would be, Tricia and Kurt are now offering a female filmmakers workshop in a couple weeks. And you bet my daughter is signed up for that, and we're trying to recruit some friends of hers to do that as well.
We talked about that as a board, and Tricia and Kurt, have grabbed a hold of that, and it's going to be a very interesting experience, I'm sure.
Yes. Oh, absolutely. And it just pleases me so much because one of the things about having children is you really don't know who they're going to end up to be. It's this exciting front row seat at watching a human unfold. And I would never have thought that I would have a daughter who was into filmmaking. It's just not, I'm not a filmmaker. I love telling stories. I love writing. I had an interlude with photography, but the actual filmmaking and the amount of computer work that she has to do with the editing it boggles my mind. I have no idea what she's doing, frankly. And that's wonderful because this is her thing, and she makes movies with her sisters and her friends all the time and sits down and edits them and has this product that she's proud of and is now talking about wanting to learn how to code. And it just blows my mind. But you see that really came out of that came out of the library.
Right.
She wouldn't have known that about
Right.
herself if there hadn't been this program that was offered through MCTV and Ilsley.
Right. Yeah. And there's all kinds of possibilities as the technology changes, when you watch all the movies that are being made, and some being made under very difficult circumstances, and,
Yes.
such as we've seen lately,
Yes.
and some beautiful expressions of creativity,
Yes.
and all of that is work. So you like storytelling,
Yes.
okay? Was that an early thing? Or
Always.
Always.
Always. Yes. I was always a reader. I am an only child, so I read. I read. And I also, as I mentioned, lived in the dark ages before the internet. That wasn't a thing until college.
Right.
Before VCRs. And so books and then books on tape were such a part of my childhood. And I always loved to write. And my issue was, for most of my life, that I didn't think that was my story. Being a writer, coming from this suburb that I lived in, where the story was you went to college and then you did something so that you could live in, if not that suburb, maybe another suburb.
Right.
So being a doctor or a lawyer or
Sure.
teacher was acceptable too. But writer, I don't think anybody talked about wanting to be a writer. And I just didn't think it was possible. So for so much of my life, through high school, through college, post-college, I never entertained the idea that I could write as a part of my life other than, well, I'll figure out a way in whichever job I'm in to do some writing. So I was always writing, and I was always getting good feedback for the writing that I did. But it really was not until we moved to Vermont and I wasn't working anymore because we had just moved here and we had 3 young children, and I had quiet time because
Right.
we were in Vermont, which is quiet relative to the rest of the country anyway, and we didn't really know anyone yet at that point. And I had 3 children who napped for a couple of hours every afternoon.
Oh, blessings.
So I know. So I filled that time with writing when we
good for
first
you.
moved here. And that's how I started a blog, just telling the story of our life here. At that
Okay.
point, we knew more people outside of Vermont than in
Sure.
Vermont. So it was a way of sharing what was happening with the rest of our friends and family. And then that became a bi-weekly column for the Addison Independent called Faith in Vermont, which I still write, which is really just stories
Sure.
of my life, of our family's life right here.
Yeah. That's great. So do you like it to get up and tell stories too?
Out loud.
Out loud.
Not usually.
Not
That's why I
usually.
write. I often think that it must be odd for people who have read my column
Right.
to meet me in person, because the nice thing with a column is you can edit it and reread it and rework it. And speaking, I don't mind public speaking. I did theater as my main activity throughout childhood. I wasn't a sports kid. I was a
Okay.
theater kid. So I don't mind that as long as I have a script.
Okay. Well, that's fair. You've done very well without a script today.
Thank you.
Hey, I thank you for the conversation. I think we're just about out of time.
Thank you, Len.
And we appreciate this, and we're excited about the library with you and your children.
Thank you so much. We're excited too, and this has been a lot of fun.
Okay, good.